Healthcare is too expensive. Employers are offsetting costs onto their employees. Who will make health benefits affordable for hardworking Americans and their families? You will. This is the Empowering Plans Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you once again emphasize the benefit in benefit plan. Now prepare to learn, plan, save, and protect with the FIA Group.
Well, hello there. It's me, Ron Peck, Chief Legal Officer at the FIA Group. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, he doesn't sound like an attorney, you're right, I don't. However, I promise you, I have paid the bar fees. I am still a member of that brotherhood and sisterhood of legal professionals. Speaking of legal professionals, I have across the table from me. Now, let me wait a moment and allow that to marinate. I am at a table, and across from me, looking at me, is another human being, and we're in the same space. It is an honor and a privilege to occupy that space with you, Kaitlyn MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod. How you doing?
Pretty good.
So for those who don't know what you do here, you want to let people know a little bit about the stuff you're working on at the FIA Group?
Sure. I am an attorney in the PGC department. I work mostly on consulting requests that come in and the non-quantitative treatment limitations comparative analysis for mental health parity.
You know, I like how it started easy. It's sort of like learning how to ski. You know, you started with the beginner because you're like, I'm an attorney. Then you got a little bit more complicated. It's like, and I do consulting with PGC, throwing out some of the acronyms. But then we're hitting up the NQTL, and it's like, oh man, I'm on the double blood diamond, and you know, I'm going downhill, and I can't keep up. Listen, for those who are listening in right now, and they're thinking, that stuff sounds complicated. That stuff sounds sophisticated. You're right. It is. Kudos to you and the team for keeping up with just this stuff that just keeps coming out. I mean, for those of you who get the emails from all these different industry associations and organizations, and it's at the point where you're getting multiple emails a day with these announcements. I mean, most of us spam, junk folder, right? But you're reading every single one because you got to figure out, is this important to our people, to our team, to our employees, to the employees that work for the groups that we represent, the groups themselves, the employers, the brokers, the carriers, the TPAs. There's so many people in this industry that are relying on you to let them know what's important, what's not, how's it going to impact them, and is there something they should be doing now? Not to put a lot of weight onto your shoulders. One of the recent rules or sort of regs that you spotted that's creating some buzz, at least internally, that I know you wanted to talk about, technically it's the Mental Health Matters Act. Right? We know from a legal and sort of political standpoint, often, you know, something that's really impactful just kind of gets packed in with a bunch of other stuff, and then it gets sort of a general label and it sneaks through. I often think of the Trojan horse, you know, right? You know, and it kind of snuck in this horse behind the walls of Troy. And I often feel the same way, where this invading army kind of sneaks into the horse. That's this Mental Health Matters Act, which, let me tell you, based on our last podcast, by the way, I don't remember, Kaitlyn, we talked about mental health and how important it was and the expanding benefits. I think we both agree mental health does matter.
Right.
And so no one's going to argue with letting this Trojan horse behind the walls. But what was hiding within the horse? Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah. So inside the Mental Health Matters Act is the Employee and Retiree Access to Justice Act. And this is a fancy name for an act that would amend ERISA to disallow any discretionary authority clauses in a plan document, as well as ban mandatory arbitration clauses in a plan.
Wow. So I love justice. Do you like justice?
Yes.
Superman's one of my favorite superheroes. I know it's a little lame, right? Everyone thinks Batman is so cool. I'm still a Superman guy myself. All about justice, right? This, I think, takes it a little beyond justice, right? And now we're talking about more or less reforming one of the key tenets of fundamental sort of underpinning or foundation for self-funded health benefit plans. I remember reading about this, and it was a bit of a shock. I was a little bit more surprised that we didn't hear more noise at the time. I want you to maybe go into a little bit of detail about what you read there and what you saw. And then I'm going to try and pull it back a little bit more to sort of the 30,000 foot level and talk a little bit about the overarching impact and why this is maybe a bigger concern than just this proposed bill.
Sure. So the main piece that everyone in our industry, I think, will be most concerned with is the discretionary authority piece. Basically, the law would remove any and all references in the plan document to discretionary authority for the plan sponsor, for the TPA, whoever is administering the plan. This is besides the fact that any courts will also need to have a different level of review. So in many courts, depending on case law and things, there are different levels of review. In ERISA law, it's usually pretty discretionary for the courts to look at. They always kind of look at what the plan sponsor has decided, what the TPA has decided, and give some deference to that. This would change all of that. Instead, courts would need to look at any case de novo, which means for the first time again. They wouldn't look at past practice. They wouldn't consider what the plan sponsor had decided for this particular individual or what they've done in the past. Instead, the judge would consider what they think the plan document says.
Discretionary authority and the role it plays in self-funding health benefits is something that I remember from way back when I started with the FIA group, the better part of 2 decades ago. And at the time, we were focused almost entirely on subrogation. Pat's looking at me like, oh, those were the days, buddy. Subrogation. And even then, when almost everything we did was subrogation, I remember how important this concept of plan administrator discretionary authority was. I was tasked when I first joined the team as really the first attorney at the company other than Adam himself. One of the things I had to do was write up some letters, template letters, form letters, to deal with situations where an attorney or an insurance adjuster representing the plan participant did not want to reimburse the plan, or they were appealing sort of a denial by the plan in a situation where there was third-party liability. And often the argument would be, well, you can't say that the claim is, for instance, denied because of an illegal act, because my client, the plan participant, the one who's injured, the one whose claims you're denying, wasn't convicted in a court of law. So because they weren't convicted of an illegal act, you can't exclude for an illegal act. And I'm telling you, 2 decades ago, the argument was all about, well, a criminal court needs to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. You're talking about these standards of proof, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beyond a reasonable doubt. Very hard to prove. Those of us with any kind of a legal education know it's actually the most difficult standard of proof to meet. But a plan administrator, because of this discretionary authority, they just can't be arbitrary or capricious. That's the easiest standard to prove. So while a district attorney may look at the facts and say, I don't have enough here to prove that you committed a crime beyond a reasonable doubt, a plan administrator could look at the exact same evidence and say, based on the discretionary authority that I have under ERISA, I have more than enough to say that some sort of an illegal act took place without it being arbitrary or capricious. Kaitlyn, you know what I'm worried about, though, is that there are those out there. There's obviously enough support to get this added to a law, to get it through the House, to get it to the Senate for consideration. It has enough support as is. Just that is concerning to me, because what that tells me is that lawmakers, their constituents, don't understand self-funding, don't understand ERISA, and don't understand how this discretionary authority benefits American workers and their families, the people who are on these plans. And that by taking these rights away from plan administrators, away from third-party administrators, away from experts who understand health benefits, and putting it into the hands of a court system, which is already overburdened. And let's face it, they've had a few controversial decisions in the justice system lately, right? Making decisions as to what's payable and what's not. I worry about the philosophy behind this. So whether this particular law gets passed or not, I worry about the philosophy and the politics that allow it to be conceived in the first place. What do you think about that? I know I'm throwing a ton at you, and I'm asking you to kind of leave the analysis and go into more, a personal sort of feeling about this. But I mean, are you worried when you start to see things like this?
Yeah, no, I definitely am. I think, you're right that a lot of people don't understand ERISA. In fact, everyone in law school didn't want to touch ERISA with a 10-foot pole.
Oh.
And, it's a complicated law. And I don't think a lot of people, especially in Congress, understand it. And they don't live it. They don't have to deal with the industry. And they don't understand that the discretionary authority that plans need to be able to function is essential for self-funding and in general to be able to provide health benefits.
I think maybe what's useful, and sometimes when we look at something like this, you kind of want to look into a crystal ball and say like, ooh, what's going to happen? What does the future tell? And I think that if you look at traditional fully funded insurance where people just pay their premium to a carrier and they shift the risk to that carrier, and the carrier is the one who is financially responsible to pay the claims, the carrier is the one who decides what's paid and what's not, carrier has all the power, and the insured, you take, I like to call it the risk monkey, you take the risk monkey off your back and you put it onto them, and now it's on them. Traditional insurance is more highly regulated at the state level and federally than the pure self-funded ERISA plan. And all you have to do is look at all of the issues that the insurance industry is dealing with, right? Higher costs, conflicts with providers, just administrative errors and clerical errors that lead to lawsuits and class actions. And I look at it and I say, that's what a hyper-regulated health insurance industry looks like. And when you look at these self-funded employer plans, employers, generally speaking, are able to provide more robust, generous benefits to their employees and their families for less cost, and there's much less conflict. It tends to just work a lot smoother. And I worry that if you hyper-regulate these self-funded plans, they're going to look a lot more like the traditional insurance market that admittedly is having a lot of issues and a lot of people don't particularly like. And I sometimes wonder, and maybe this is tinfoil hat Ron talking, and I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist, I sometimes wonder if these efforts are meant to take something that's working very well, which is the self-funded or ERISA-based health benefits industry, and have it work a little bit less well. Because, it's been more than a decade, but you remember with Obamacare, with the ACA, with the exchanges, even then they were talking about how one of the biggest risks or one of the biggest threats to the individual exchanges and the marketplace that was really being pushed and promoted by Obamacare was self-funding. Because while these plans were very attractive to people who were paying way too many premiums for their insurance, it wasn't as attractive to someone who was getting a really good plan from their employer in a self-funded plan setup. And so they weren't getting the really healthy people, the people that they need to pay premium but never have any claims, because those are the people who are going to provide the money that pays for the people with the higher dollar claims who are on the exchanges. And they wanted them off the self-funded plans and onto the exchanges. But these self-funded plans are really nice. People don't want to leave the self-funded plan. And I still think even 10 years later or more, I think they're chipping away at the self-funded industry, trying to give it black eyes, make it look ugly, so that they will get people to say, the luster is gone. So in the last 2 minutes, is there anything else going on in the news that you want people to be aware of? I know we dominated the entire podcast talking about this discretionary authority and ERISA issue, but I do know there are some other things that are simmering. You want your lightning round, let people know what they should be looking out for?
Sure. The one thing that's on my mind more than anything else that's been in the news is the new ALS drug that has recently been passed by the FDA through their advanced approval process. The reason why this is so kind of controversial, if you don't know about it, is this particular drug does not have a phase 3 clinical trial. The FDA scientists do not think it's effective. There's not enough evidence to prove that it is effective compared to any other current ALS drug, but the FDA has said, because obviously ALS is a very life-threatening disease, that having to wait the 3 years for the completion of the clinical trial would be an issue. People could be able to benefit from this in the short term. But also it's kind of scary. Are plans going to cover this? A lot of cases, plans have experimental investigational requirements for coverage. And most of those definitions, even our definition in the plan, requires the drugs to already have had a phase 3 trial on its efficacy to be able to be covered. It's an extremely expensive drug. Put out that it's going to be around like $150,000 a year for this. And the drug is extremely expensive. So much so that CMS isn't going to cover the whole cost of it. When it comes to self-funded plans, I think plans really need to keep in mind, obviously they want to be able to provide this life-saving care to individuals, but do they want to cover these experimental or investigational drugs that haven't been proven to work at all?
I know the buzz around this ALS drug, a lot of it had to do with the fact that a lot of the research was funded with money from the Ice Bucket Challenge. And so that almost everybody who participated in that, which was, again, almost everybody, gives you like a sense of ownership. Like, we did it. Right. We did it. And it was interesting because even my wife, a very educated, wonderful woman, brilliant. She's only made one mistake in her entire life, and that was marrying me. She comes to me and she's like, oh, did you hear about this? I'm like, yeah. But from what I've heard, even the manufacturer, the people who develop the drug, they're like, it extends the life by average on 5 months. And it's like, well, that's like so horrifying to think that 5 months is like, okay, so 5 more months. I mean, 5 months, sometimes I blink my eyes and 5 months are gone. And you don't want to do a cost benefit analysis, especially when you're talking about people's lives. And as attorneys, even in a lawsuit, when they talk about wrongful death, right? And you're putting a price tag on somebody's life, right? You never want to do that, but sometimes you have to. And I always think it's so interesting. You mentioned that the cost of the drug, we're talking $150,000. Every person who's taking this drug, if you said to them, hey, look, I could give you this drug and you'll get an extra 5 months of life, or I could give your family $100,000 right now. How many people are going to say that the 5 months, they'd rather keep that $100,000 away from their family, which could maybe impact them far beyond those 5 months for another 5 months? The issue is this is not a cure. This is not something, every minute is precious. I get that. And people use the word priceless. That time with my family is priceless. But in reality, there is no such thing as priceless because nothing is for free. And at some point, we as a society need to do that cost benefit analysis and ask, the money that's going towards this, is it being taken away from the plan and its ability to pay for a child's leukemia treatment that could potentially save their life? Money doesn't grow on trees, and we need to allocate every dollar to its greatest effect. And I just don't think people in general understand that this money does not grow on trees, is not unlimited. And the entities, like you mentioned, things like the FDA and these different sort of thresholds that need to be met are there to do that difficult work and ensure that the limited resources are being spent on things that are effective, meaningfully so. And once that gets watered down, we're going to flush money down the drain. And it's a horrible thing to say when you're talking about people's lives and extending those lives, but is it worth it? And I think even for those patients, if they really think about it, even they may say it might not be worth it. And that's horrible and scary, but also a bit concerning. We need to get a handle on this stuff. Listen, heavy stuff. Thank you for spending this time with me. On behalf of myself, Kaitlyn, Pat, the entire FIA group, thank you for joining us for another Empowering Plans podcast with the FIA group. Be well. Talk to you soon.